The Phoenix sun beat down on the asphalt, hot enough to fry an egg, they say. It felt hot enough to melt the soles of my worn work boots right there on the curb. An hour ago, I'd used my key to walk into the sleek, air-conditioned apartment I shared with my wife, Brenda. Now that same key felt like useless, mocking metal in my pocket. Beside me sat 2 duffel bags and a couple of beat-up cardboard boxes, containing the random flotsam of a life suddenly, brutally capsized. Brenda's words still echoed in the shimmering heat waves rising from the pavement. "It's over, Gary. You need to go." Just like that. 25 years, 1,000 miles, a whole life given up, ended on a Tuesday afternoon with less ceremony than firing a temp. My name is Gary Peterson. I'm 54 years old, and until 18 months ago, I was a structural welder and fabricator back in Cleveland, Ohio. For 30 years, that's who I was. Knew my trade inside out. Could lay a bead smoother than butter, read complex blueprints like a kid reads comics, build things with steel and fire that were meant to last. Took pride in it. Solid work, solid pay, solid life. Cleveland wasn't glamorous, maybe, but it was mine. Owned a small brick bungalow near Parma, paid off years ago. Fixed the roof myself, built the deck out back, knew every squeak in the floorboards. My folks lived 10 minutes away, getting older, needed help sometimes. My sister, her kids. Sunday dinners were loud and mandatory. My buddies, guys I'd known since high school, guys from the union local, we had our routines. Browns games in the fall, mostly misery, but shared misery. Beers down at O'Malley's, maybe some walleye fishing on Lake Erie when the weather broke. Worked at the same fabrication plant for 15 years. Good union job, solid benefits, respected for my skills. Knew everyone, knew my place. I figured I'd retire from there, maybe tinker in the garage, watch the grandkids eventually. The usual script. Brenda and I had been married 25 years. We were comfortable. Different, maybe. I was steady, predictable. She was always the ambitious one, worked in marketing, always looking for the next rung on the ladder. But I supported her, cheered her successes, listened to her frustrations. I thought we were a team, balancing each other out. I was the anchor, she was the sail. That's how I saw it anyway. Turns out, anchors just hold you back when you're determined to catch a faster wind. About 2 years ago, Brenda started talking about Phoenix. She'd been interviewing online, quietly at first, then with growing excitement. A tech startup out there booming had offered her a director of marketing position. The title was bigger, the salary was, well, it was more than double what she made in Cleveland. It was, she called it, a golden opportunity, a game changer. At first, I was hesitant. Phoenix, Arizona. It felt like the surface of the sun, a world away from the gray skies and familiar grit of Northeast Ohio. Leave my job, my house, my parents, my whole life? It sounded insane, but Brenda was relentless. She painted pictures. Sunshine year-round, hiking, vibrant restaurants, a dynamic city full of opportunity. "It's not just my chance, Gary," she'd argued passionately, night after night. "It's our chance. A fresh start. Think of the life we could have. No more brutal winters." She framed it as a joint adventure, a step up for us. She downplayed my concerns with practiced ease. "Your skills? Gary, you're a master welder. You could get a job anywhere in 5 minutes," she declared confidently, though she knew nothing about the skilled trades market. "Phoenix is booming. They're desperate for good workers." When I showed her online job boards that looked less promising, she waved it away. "Oh, those sites are never accurate. Besides, maybe you could take a little break when we first get there. Enjoy the sun, relax. I'll be making more than enough to cover us easily while you find the perfect fit. You deserve a break after working so hard all these years." She played the support card beautifully. I need you, Gary. I can't do this alone. You're my rock, my support system. It wore me down. Seeing her excitement, her ambition firing on all cylinders, I loved her. I wanted her to be happy, to succeed. Maybe she was right. Maybe Cleveland was getting stale. Maybe a change would be good for both of us. The idea of escaping those lake-effect snows held a certain appeal, I had to admit. So I agreed, and the process of extracting myself from the life I knew began. It felt like pulling teeth from my own soul, telling my parents I was moving 1,000 miles away. My mom cried. My dad just looked stoic and disappointed, which was worse. Telling my buddies felt like a betrayal. Arizona? What the hell's in Arizona, Petey? My friend Mike grumbled over beers, echoing my own internal doubts. Leaving my job meant walking away from 15 years of seniority, a pension I was close to vesting in, the camaraderie of the shop floor. My boss shook his head. You sure about this, Gary? Good welders are gold here. Out there, different ballgame. We sold the house. Fast. Took the first decent offer because Brenda had a start date. Watching the moving truck pull away with our life packed into boxes felt like watching my own funeral procession. The drive across the country was long, mostly silent. Brenda was buzzing with plans. I felt like I was driving towards a cliff edge. Phoenix was a shock. The heat hit like a physical blow the moment we stepped out of the car. Everything looked beige or terracotta, baked under a relentless sun. Nothing felt familiar. Nothing felt like home. Brenda found us a rental apartment, sleek, modern, expensive, in a trendy complex with a pool and a gym near her new office in Scottsdale. It felt like living in a hotel, temporary and impersonal. Most of the down payment and initial rent came from the proceeds of selling my house in Cleveland. Brenda dived into her new job like a fish thrown back into the ocean. Long hours, networking events, business trips. She was energized, thriving. I started the job hunt, and quickly discovered Brenda's optimistic predictions were pure fantasy. The booming market for skilled welders wasn't exactly clamoring for a 50-something guy from Ohio with union experience, but no local certs. The jobs I saw advertised paid significantly less than I was used to, often non-union, with lousy benefits. It was demoralizing. After weeks of sending out resumes and getting few responses, I swallowed my pride and took a job at a small, non-air-conditioned metal fabrication shop way out on the west side. Hot, dirty work, mostly basic repairs, paying about half what I made in Cleveland. But it was something. It kept my hands busy, brought in a little money, preserved a shred of my self-respect. I didn't tell Brenda how much less I was making, didn't tell her about the condescending younger boss or the lack of benefits. I just said I'd found something to tide me over. The dynamic between us shifted almost immediately. Brenda was the star now, the primary breadwinner, her career trajectory soaring. I was the guy who tagged along. She made the decisions about furniture for the fancy apartment, about where we ate, if we ate together, about finances. My lower-paying, less prestigious job became a subtle, then not so subtle, point of friction. I felt diminished, dependent, and increasingly isolated in a city where I knew no one but my increasingly distant wife. The next year unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck I was powerless to stop. Brenda's career didn't just take off, it went supernova. Her startup loved her. She got a promotion to VP within 6 months, complete with stock options and a hefty raise. Her life became a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, conferences, and schmoozing with the young, slick tech crowd her company attracted. Her transformation was stark. She bought a whole new wardrobe, sharp power suits, designer dresses, expensive shoes. She started talking differently, peppering her conversation with corporate jargon and buzzwords I didn't understand. She joined an exclusive gym, started getting expensive haircuts, even subtly changed the way she spoke, smoothing out her Cleveland vowels. She was actively shedding her old skin, and apparently her old life with it. Her circle of friends changed completely. Gone were the calls back home to her Cleveland buddies. Now it was all about the team from work, ambitious climbers, mostly younger than us, who talked about funding rounds, exit strategies, and weekend trips to Sedona or Vegas. When I occasionally tagged along to after-work drinks or company parties, I felt like a museum piece. My stories about the welding shop or the Browns fell flat. I didn't understand their inside jokes, didn't share their relentless optimism about disrupting industries. I was a blue-collar guy in a white-collar world, and Brenda started making it clear, in small, cutting ways, that I didn't quite fit her new brand. "Gary, that shirt really isn't appropriate for the company mixer," she might sigh, looking me up and down with a critical eye. Or, after a dinner with her colleagues where I mostly listened quietly, she'd say on the drive home, "You know, you could try to engage a little more, honey. These people are important connections for us." The U.S. felt increasingly hollow. Her patience with my job situation evaporated. My updates about the frustrating search for better welding work were met with distracted nods or suggestions that maybe I should pivot into something else. Maybe get into coding or sales, as if 30 years of specialized skill could be swapped out like changing a shirt. The fact that my tide-me-over job was still my reality became an unspoken source of tension, almost embarrassment for her. The distance grew, emotional and physical. She worked later and later, often grabbing dinner with colleagues. Weekends filled up with work events or needing downtime alone. Our conversations became purely logistical: bills, groceries, scheduling. The easy intimacy we once shared vanished, replaced by a polite, strained courtesy when we were in the same room, which felt less and less frequent. She became fiercely protective of her phone, angling the screen away, taking calls out on the balcony overlooking the pool complex. Texts would arrive late at night, met with a quick, furtive tap and a dismissive, "Oh, just work stuff," if I happened to glance over. I wasn't stupid. I knew the signs, the secrecy, the emotional withdrawal, the subtle rewriting of our shared history to emphasize her sacrifices and my lack of adaptation. I tried talking to her multiple times, tried expressing how isolated I felt, how much I missed us, how worried I was about the growing chasm between us. My efforts were consistently deflected. "Oh, Gary, don't be so sensitive. I'm just stressed with work." "You're imagining things because you're unhappy with your job. Maybe you should find a hobby, meet some people. We just need to adjust. This is a big change for both of us." She expertly turned my valid concerns back on me, painting me as needy, insecure, or unsupportive of her incredible success. The gaslighting was subtle at first, then became blatant. I felt trapped, isolated in a city I hated, estranged from the woman I'd crossed the country for, working a dead-end job with my support system 1,000 miles away. The sunshine felt mocking, the palm trees alien. I missed the gray skies of Cleveland, the camaraderie of the shop, the easy comfort of old friends who knew me, saw me, not as an appendage to a successful executive, but as Gary Peterson, the guy who could weld anything and tell a decent joke. Then came the final catalyst. Brenda landed the Moby Dick of job offers, executive vice president of marketing at a major competitor, a huge publicly traded tech firm. The salary was astronomical, the title immense. It was the absolute pinnacle of the career she'd been chasing so relentlessly. She came home late one Tuesday evening, practically vibrating with suppressed excitement. She didn't even bother with small talk. "Gary, sit down," she said, standing in the middle of the expensive living room, radiating an unnerving level of cool confidence. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. I braced myself. "Okay? Good news about work?" I asked, trying to sound supportive one last time. "Incredible news," she confirmed, a tight, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "I got the EVP position at Viridian Tech. Starts in 2 weeks." "Wow, Bren," I said, genuinely impressed despite everything. That's amazing. Congratulations." "Thank you," she said crisply. It's everything I've worked for, and it's made me realize something very clearly." She paused, her gaze unwavering, utterly devoid of warmth. "Our paths have diverged, Gary. Completely. I'm on an upward trajectory, heading for the stratosphere. And well, you're not. You don't fit in this world. You never really did." The bluntness stole my breath. What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over," she stated matter-of-factly, like discussing a quarterly report. "This arrangement isn't working for me anymore. It hasn't been working for a long time, if I'm honest. I need to be surrounded by people who operate at my level, who understand my world. I need space to become the person I'm meant to be." "Arrangement?" I repeated, the word like a slap. "Brenda, this is our marriage. We moved here together. Because you asked me to. Because you said you needed me." The sacrifices, the promises, the sheer unfairness of it all surged up, choking me. She waved a dismissive hand, unmoved. Yes, I know you made sacrifices, Gary. And I was grateful, truly, at the time. But circumstances change. People change. I've changed. I've outgrown this. Outgrown us. Continuing this would be holding me back. And frankly, it's not fair to you either, keeping you in a life where you clearly don't belong. The condescension was breathtaking. "So what?" I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. "You just snap your fingers and 25 years disappear? I leave my entire life behind for you, support you through this whole transition, and now that you've made it, you just throw me out." "Essentially, yes," she confirmed, her voice chillingly calm. "It's time for a clean break. This apartment," she gestured around the sleek, impersonal space, "is leased in my name now, paid for by my income, and I need it for myself. I think it would be best if you moved out by the end of the week, Saturday at the latest." I stared at her, utterly poleaxed. No remorse, no discussion, no offer of help or transition, just an eviction notice from my own life, delivered by the woman I'd given up everything for. It wasn't just a breakup. It felt like being discarded, like a piece of old equipment being surplused because it no longer served its purpose in her grand corporate strategy. "Moved out?" I finally managed, the words feeling thick and foreign in my mouth. "Move out where, Brenda?" "I have nowhere to go. I barely make enough to cover gas and groceries at that shop." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, the first crack in her icy composure. "Well, you'll have to figure that out, won't you? Call your family back in Cleveland. Go back there. That's probably where you belong anyway." She turned away then, dismissing me as easily as she might dismiss a subordinate after a meeting. "I have some calls to make. I trust you'll be efficient." She walked towards the master bedroom and closed the door, leaving me standing alone in the living room. The hum of the central air conditioning suddenly deafening, the bright Arizona sunshine pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows feeling like an accusation. Numbly, mechanically, I found a couple of old duffel bags in the back of the closet. I started pulling clothes out of drawers, grabbing toiletries from the bathroom we no longer shared. Then I found a couple of cardboard boxes. The last Amazon order came in and started throwing in random personal items. A few books, photos of my parents, my favorite coffee mug, the small toolkit I kept for household repairs. Each item felt like a piece of a life being dismantled, packed away like evidence from a crime scene. An hour later, I was standing on that scorching sidewalk, the door locked behind me, wondering if the heat or the shock would make me pass out first. The first few days were a blur of cheap motels, stale coffee, and overwhelming disorientation. I found a place off the I-10, the kind with peeling paint and questionable stains on the carpet, paying cash day by day from the meager funds I had in my personal checking account. Thank God I'd kept one separate, however small. Lying on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the full weight of my situation crashed down. I was 54 years old, essentially homeless, jobless. The fabrication shop was too far to commute to, without reliable transport or cash for gas, penniless and utterly alone in a city I despised, 1,000 miles from anyone who gave a damn about me. Calling home was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. How do you tell your elderly parents that the golden opportunity you moved across the country for has imploded? That your wife of 25 years kicked you out? That you're living in a flea-bag motel? My mom cried, worried sick. My dad, ever stoic, just said gruffly, "Well, hell, Gary. You need money? You need to come home." His offer, though well-intentioned, felt like another layer of failure. Calling my best friend Mark was easier, but still humiliating. "Jesus, Petey," he'd said, echoing my own disbelief. "She really just tossed you out? After everything? That's colder than a Cleveland winter." He offered to wire me money, offered to drive out and help me pack whatever Brenda might eventually let me retrieve from the apartment. His unwavering support was a lifeline, but it couldn't fix the fundamental problem. The anger started to burn through the shock and shame. Cold, hard anger. How dare she? How dare she use me, exploit my loyalty and love, and then discard me like trash the moment I became inconvenient to her shiny new life? All those promises, all those declarations of needing me, all the talk of our future. It was all lies. Calculated manipulation to get what she wanted. My support, my acquiescence, the financial cushion from selling my house, until she didn't need it anymore. This wasn't just a marriage ending. This felt like fraud. She had lured me here under false pretenses, benefited immensely from my sacrifice, and then abandoned me in a vulnerable position. There had to be some recourse, some measure of justice. This couldn't just be it. Fueled by righteous anger and desperation, I started researching online, looking for legal aid societies in Phoenix, searching for lawyers who handled divorce, or maybe even civil cases involving broken promises. The terminology was confusing. Equitable distribution, community property, promissory estoppel, unjust enrichment. I didn't know where I stood legally, especially since we were still technically married, but she had effectively evicted me. I used the last of my ready cash for an initial consultation with a lawyer named David Chen, whose website mentioned handling difficult family law and civil disputes. His office was modest, located in a less glamorous part of Phoenix. Chen was a younger guy, sharp, attentive, listened patiently as I laid out the whole sordid story, starting from the job offer in Cleveland, the move, my sacrifices. I'd brought the closing statement from my house sale as proof. Brenda's skyrocketing success, her changing attitude, and the brutal final discard. I emphasized the promises she'd made, how she'd downplayed my career risks, how she'd needed my support to make the move possible. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Okay, Gary, this is tough, no question. Arizona is a community property state, which applies to assets acquired during the marriage. But the situation is complicated by your significant pre-move sacrifices and her recent actions. Since you're still married, our first step would be filing for divorce immediately. Within that, we argue for a massively unequal division of assets accumulated since the move, given her conduct and your contributions, including enabling her career advancement through your sacrifice. He continued, we can also argue for reimbursement or credit for the value of the separate property you liquidated, your Cleveland house, that contributed to the marital estate here, especially since the move primarily benefited her career, which she's now using to exclude you. We frame your move not just as spousal support, but as a direct, quantifiable investment in her earning potential, an investment she has now unilaterally repudiated after reaping the benefits. He also mentioned exploring claims like breach of fiduciary duty, given how she handled finances after the move, potentially sequestering assets. It won't be easy, Chen warned. She has high earnings now. She'll have aggressive lawyers, likely paid for by her new company's benefits. But the optics of her kicking you out right after landing an even bigger job, after you gave up everything, that's compelling. Juries and even judges respond to fundamental unfairness. Leaving Chen's office, I felt a flicker of hope, the first in days. It wasn't about getting rich off Brenda's success. It was about fairness. It was about recouping what I had lost based on her promises. It was about not letting her simply walk away scot-free after using me as a stepping stone and then kicking me off the ladder. Chen advised me to gather every piece of evidence I could find. Emails discussing the move, texts mentioning her promises, bank statements showing the house sale proceeds being used for the Phoenix apartment deposit and rent, pay stubs from my Cleveland job versus the Phoenix job, letters or affidavits from family and friends back home, confirming the stable life I left behind. The fight wouldn't be quick or cheap, Chen warned, but he believed I had a case worth pursuing. The battle for basic fairness had begun. The legal battle dragged on for the better part of a year. Just as David Chen predicted, Brenda, flush with cash from her new executive position and represented by a high-powered law firm, fought back tooth and nail. Her lawyer tried to portray me as lazy, unambitious, someone who failed to adapt to the vibrant Phoenix market through his own shortcomings, conveniently ignoring the 30 years of steady, skilled work history I had back in Ohio. They argued the move was a joint decision, a shared risk, and my inability to replicate my Cleveland income was my problem, not hers. They tried to minimize the value of my Cleveland house contribution and claim my presence offered no tangible benefit to her career ascent. It was infuriating, humiliating. Every legal filing felt like another attack on my character, another attempt to rewrite history. The depositions were brutal. Sitting across a conference table from Brenda, listening to her calmly lie under oath about her promises, about our relationship dynamics, about my efforts to find work, required every ounce of self-control I possessed. Her transformation was complete. She was cool, calculating, utterly detached, speaking about our shared past as if analyzing a failed business venture. The loving wife I thought I knew was truly gone, replaced by this corporate shark in designer clothes. But Chen was relentless. He presented the evidence methodically. The timeline of her job offer and our move, the documentation of my house sale and job resignation, affidavits from my parents and friends detailing the life I gave up, even pay stubs contrasting my Cleveland union wages with the pittance I earned in Phoenix. He skillfully cross-examined Brenda, highlighting the inconsistencies in her testimony, forcing her to admit I had initially resisted the move, that she had persuaded me with promises of financial security and needing my support. He emphasized the temporal link between her biggest career leap and her immediate decision to discard me. The financial cost was immense. My meager savings dwindled rapidly. Mark and my sister helped me out with loans, expressing constant outrage on my behalf. But I hated being dependent. I found slightly better work doing maintenance at a large apartment complex. Still not welding, still not great pay. But it kept me afloat and allowed me to move out of the motel into a tiny studio apartment in a rougher part of town. Every spare cent went to legal fees. Some days, eating ramen noodles for dinner, I wondered if it was worth it, if I should just cut my losses and crawl back to Cleveland defeated. But the burning sense of injustice kept me going. This wasn't just about money. It was about principle. It was about accountability. She couldn't just use a person up and throw them away without consequence simply because her stock had risen. Finally, facing a potentially damaging trial where her callous behavior would be publicly aired, and perhaps sensing the judge was leaning towards acknowledging the fundamental unfairness of the situation, Brenda's lawyers proposed a settlement conference. After hours of tense negotiation, with Chen refusing to back down on the core principle of compensation for my sacrifices, we reached an agreement. It wasn't a windfall. I didn't get half her massive new salary or stock options, but it was fair. The settlement included a significant lump sum payment from Brenda to me. The amount was calculated based largely on the equity I lost from my Cleveland house sale, plus documented moving expenses, plus an additional sum acknowledging the career disruption and my contribution to her ability to pursue the initial Phoenix opportunity. It was enough to clear my debts, repay my family, and give me a solid cushion to start over. Crucially, the settlement agreement contained language acknowledging my significant sacrifices in relocating to support her career. It wasn't an apology, but it was a documented admission of sorts. Signing the final papers felt like setting down an immense weight. Not triumph, just profound relief. The legal fight was over. I had stood my ground, refused to be erased, and clawed back a measure of fairness. With the settlement funds secured, I faced a choice. Try to build a new life from scratch in Phoenix, a city that held nothing but bad memories, or go home. It wasn't even really a choice. My heart, my roots, my sense of belonging were all still firmly planted in Northeast Ohio. Booking the one-way flight back to Cleveland felt like the first truly positive step I'd taken in nearly 2 years. The journey back was quiet, reflective. Watching the desert landscape give way to the greener, more familiar Midwest felt like exhaling after holding my breath for far too long. Landing at Cleveland Hopkins, seeing my sister and Mark waiting for me, their familiar faces etched with worry and relief, that felt like coming home. The rebuilding process began immediately. I stayed with my sister initially, then found a small, clean apartment in a familiar neighborhood. I reconnected with my old union local, put the word out I was back and looking for work. It took a few weeks, calling in old favors, proving my skills hadn't rusted over. But I landed a job, a good one, welding structural components for a new bridge project. Back in my element, sparks flying, laying down solid beads of metal, building something strong and lasting. It felt right. It felt like me. Life isn't the same as it was before Phoenix. The financial hit, the emotional scars, the lost time. Those are real. Trusting someone fully again feels like a distant prospect. There's a layer of cynicism now, a wariness I didn't have before. I learned the hard way that ambition can curdle into ruthlessness, that love and loyalty sometimes have expiration dates tied to income brackets. But I'm not broken. I'm back on my feet, in my own city, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can do for their career. I'm working with my hands again, earning my own way, standing tall. Phoenix might have year-round sunshine, but I'll take the gray skies and solid ground of Cleveland any day. I learned that sometimes the strongest structures are the ones you rebuild yourself, after the storm has passed, reinforcing the welds where the cracks used to be. And this time, the foundation feels solid. It's built on resilience, not promises.